The white dress hung over the edge of the chapel pew like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Outside, the old bell in the chapel tower rang softly, calling guests to gather. But inside the dressing room, my hand trembled just above the doorknob. I was only minutes away from marrying Caleb, the man I had once called my second chance at peace. That's all I ever really wanted. But what I heard on the other side of that door stopped everything. Welcome back to Noble Revenge Stories, where truth cuts deeper than fiction. Before we dive into today's shocking tale, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. What I heard on the other side of that door stopped everything. Two voices. Oh, urgent, intimate. One was Caleb's. The other, a woman's. I hadn't meant to listen. I hadn't even planned to stand there that long. But I did. And what I heard in that moment didn't belong in a church, and certainly not on a wedding day. They weren't words of love. They were the kind of words that rearranged your whole understanding of a person. Words that cracked open the very foundation I had built this day on. Let me just get through today, Caleb said, voice low, almost pleading. Once the honeymoon's over, I'll take care of everything. You know you're the one I want. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. I didn't hear her reply. I only heard silence and the soft sound of footsteps drawing closer to him. There was intimacy in that silence, the kind that didn't belong anywhere near a man about to say vows to another woman. Me. I backed away from the door like it had burned me. My fingers still clutched a small velvet box in my hand, my father's cufflinks. I had planned to gift them to Caleb before the ceremony. A symbol of trust, of legacy, of all the things a man should be proud to wear on the day he says forever. But now, I wasn't even sure I knew who he really was. I walked slowly back toward the dressing room, not sure what I'd say. Not sure what I could say. My daughter Leona was adjusting the train of my dress when I returned. She looked up at me, concern already blooming in her eyes. "Mama," she said gently, "is Caleb okay?" I forced a smile. "It's just nerves," I whispered. But Leona didn't smile back. He didn't even look me in the eye. I brushed her words away with my hand. My head nodded. But my heart knew better. It had started knowing long before today. A strange quiet had settled over the room, interrupted only by the clinking of mimosa glasses and soft laughter from the bridesmaids. One of them, Talia, a college friend, was teasing about how involved Caleb's late wife's family still seemed to be. "I heard they're still, like, weirdly close," she laughed. "I don't know how you deal with that, girl." I didn't reply. My eyes were locked on my phone, sitting on the table. Still black. Still no message from Caleb. Then, at exactly 10:37, the screen lit up. One line. An unknown number. "Don't marry him. He's not who you think." That was it. I stared at the message for a long time. My heart slowed to a dull, heavy thud in my chest. I didn't show anyone. I didn't even react. I simply turned the phone face down on the table and picked up my earrings, pretending my hands weren't shaking. But then came the final crack, the one I couldn't ignore. Leona came rushing into the room, her voice breathless. "There's a woman outside with Caleb," she said. They were arguing. It looked intense. A red suit. Black heels. That's how she described her. Her finger pointed at Caleb's chest. Then at the church. Then she walked away. And my heart broke, not because I didn't see it coming, but because I always had. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. I told Leona I needed a moment. And then I walked. Out of the bridal room. Down the back hallway. Past the dusty stained glass windows that had seen too many tears and too many prayers. I told myself I was just going to breathe, just going to get my mind right. But I wasn't. I was going to listen. Outside Caleb's prep room, I hesitated again. Then I heard it. The voice that once made me feel safe now made my skin crawl. And I knew then, deep down, that the wedding I had imagined in my heart no longer existed. But I hadn't come this far to run away. I had come this far to decide what part of this story still belonged to me, and what part one had to rewrite, for myself. They say love in your 40s feels different. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It doesn't come wrapped in butterflies and promises of forever. It arrives quietly, like something that finally understands what you've had to survive just to still be standing. That's how Caleb came into my life. Not with fireworks, but with stillness. At 41, I had already buried 2 marriages. One ended in silence so loud it could swallow a home whole. The other ended in shouting, sharp words that left bruises only I could see. I had a daughter, Leona, who now lived in Atlanta. She called every Sunday and visited when she could. But for the most part, I lived my days alone. Just me, a small house near the edge of town, and a collection of porch plants that refused to grow right no matter how tenderly I spoke to them. Most days, you'd find me down at the community kitchen on Cedar Lane, hair pulled back in a faded scarf, ladling soup to people who, in some way or another, reminded me of myself. Quiet people. Tired people. People who had survived things they never talked about. It was in the basement of a small church on a Tuesday afternoon that I first met Caleb. He was 47, tall, with kind eyes. Always dressed neatly, a button-down tucked just right, and a calm voice that somehow made the room quieter whenever he entered. He wore a wedding band on a chain around his neck. I noticed it once when he bent to help an elderly man who'd spilled his plate. The chain slipped out from his collar, the gold band swinging in the air for a moment before he tucked it away. Later, I would learn that it belonged to his late wife, Lydia. She had passed 5 years earlier after a long battle with breast cancer. Caleb, they said, never really dated again. He poured himself into the church instead. He led Sunday prayers like gentle poetry, never loud, never dramatic, just honest. People called him a God-fearing man. But I noticed other things. I noticed how he helped older women to their cars when it rained. How he paused during Bible study when certain verses about loss were read. How he always sat alone after service, sipping coffee with both hands, like the warmth was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. Our first real conversation wasn't romantic. It wasn't even intentional. I was wiping down tables late one evening when he asked, "Do you think people ever really heal from heartbreak?" I remember stopping, rag in hand, and looking at him for a long time before answering. "No," I said. "I think we build around the crack." That made him smile, not wide, just soft, thoughtful. Like he understood exactly what I meant. That's how it started. Quiet moments, small things. The next Thursday he brought me a cup of coffee during cleanup. Black, no sugar, just the way I like it. I never told him how I take my coffee, but somehow he knew. He always opened doors. Always waited until I got to my car before walking away. Never rushed. Never pushed. I told my friend Ruthie one day, "He makes me feel like I can exhale." Over the next few months, Thursdays became our thing. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into long walks through the old garden trails behind the chapel. I'd tell him about my failed marriages. He'd talk about Lydia, how she used to hum while folding laundry, how she once planted rosemary by the porch just because it reminded her of her grandmother. He met Leona over dinner one night. She told me afterward, "Mama, he looks at you like you don't need fixing. Like you're already whole." And I realized that was the first time in a long time I hadn't felt broken. He never asked for more than I was ready to give. And slowly I began to trust that. I once told Ruthie, "I'm not looking for fire anymore. I'm just tired of being cold." And with Caleb, I finally felt warm. The proposal came quietly too. No flash mob. No violin quartet. Just the two of us, sitting on the front steps of my late mother's chapel after a spring cleaning event. He pulled out a small wooden box from his jacket and said, "I know we both come with cracks, but I think we can build something strong around them." I didn't cry. I didn't faint. I just said yes, because it didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like a right beginning. We planned a small wedding. Just close friends, the choir, and a few church elders who had blessed our union with tearful prayers. The ceremony would take place in the same chapel I once walked out of in tears, years ago, after my first marriage ended. This time I told myself I would walk in whole. The morning of the wedding was soft and still, the kind of day that feels wrapped in prayer. I sat in the dressing room with the scent of lilac in the air, makeup artist brushing silence into my cheeks. My dress was simple, ivory lace with a train long enough to make a statement, but short enough to say I wasn't trying to prove anything. Outside, the clouds hovered gently, southern heat thick in the air. But my thoughts weren't on the weather. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for a message from Caleb, something sweet, something steady, just like he always sent. But the screen stayed black. Still I smiled through it. I reminded myself that love can be quiet, that maybe he was just soaking in the moment. But something inside me had started whispering, a whisper I didn't want to hear. And now, standing in this white dress, minutes away from vows, I kept thinking about those early moments. The stillness, the coffee, the way his voice dipped when he talked about Lydia. Was it love, or was it another mask? I didn't know yet, but the whisper in my gut was growing louder. And soon I would have no choice but to listen. You always imagine that the biggest moments of your life will be loud. Trumpets blaring, people cheering. Something big to let you know your world is about to change. But that's not how mine came. It came in silence. A small vibration on a wedding morning. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Don't marry him. He's not who you think. No punctuation. No name. Just 10 words. 10 words that sliced through the air sharper than any scream ever could. I didn't show the message to anyone. I didn't even let my face betray what I had just read. I simply turned the phone face down and sat there in my bridal robe, hands folded in my lap, pretending everything was still okay. But it wasn't, because deep down, I already knew. Leona sat beside me, pretending to scroll through her phone, but I could feel her watching me. She always did that, read me without asking. She was a daughter born with an old soul and the kind of wisdom that usually takes a lifetime to earn. You sure you're okay, Mama? She asked. I nodded too fast. Just a little overwhelmed, I replied. That's normal, right? She didn't answer, just kept watching me. And that silence said more than words ever could. I tried to shake the feeling off. I told myself that maybe the message was a prank. Someone being cruel. Someone jealous. Someone who didn't know the man Caleb truly was. I had seen his tenderness, his care, the quiet kindness that laced his every gesture. I had believed in him so completely that I had never once considered he might be a man with shadows. But that morning the shadows were starting to show. Then came Talia, one of my bridesmaids, loud and full of stories like always. She popped another grape into her mouth and giggled like the day was just another party. I heard Caleb's late wife's family is still super involved, she said casually. Like, showing up unannounced kind of involved. I don't know how you deal with that, girl. You're better than me. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have thoughts, but because I was starting to realize how little I actually knew about the man waiting for me at the altar. I thought about Lydia, Caleb's late wife. He spoke of her with softness, reverence even. He still kept her photos in his study. I had never seen that as a red flag. I saw it as grief. Sacred grief. But now, it felt like a presence that had never truly left. It felt like a door I was never invited to walk through. And then, like God himself was trying to make sure I didn't walk into that chapel blind, the final sign came. Leona burst into the room. She wasn't calm. Not like usual. Mama, she said breathless, there's a woman outside with Caleb. I stood quickly. What woman? I don't know her, she said. Red suit. Black heels. She's arguing with him. It wasn't loud, but it looked serious. The room fell still. Even the bridesmaids stopped mid-laugh. I stepped to the window and pulled the curtain back, careful not to draw attention. From the second-floor vantage point, I scanned the parking lot, and that's when I saw her. She was striking. Tall. Poised. Dressed like she wasn't here for a wedding, but a confrontation. Her finger pointed firmly into Caleb's chest. His head was bowed slightly, his hands moving like he was trying to calm her down, or explain something she already knew the truth about. And then she turned on her heel and walked away. Just like that. My knees buckled slightly, but I held my stance. That red suit stayed in my mind. Bright. Brazen. Unapologetic. She didn't belong here, not unless she had a reason to. And suddenly, every conversation I'd had with Caleb played back in my mind. Every missed dinner. Every emergency church visit. Every time he looked just a little too tired to explain where he'd been. I didn't want to believe it. But I'd been here before. My first husband had taught me to doubt myself. The second taught me how to survive that doubt. And now here I was again, on the edge of a new beginning that smelled a lot like an ending. I told Leona I needed a moment alone. I slipped out of the bridal room and walked down the hallway, slowly, quietly, the lace of my gown brushing against the old wooden floor. Every step I took toward Caleb's prep room felt heavier than the last. I wasn't sure if I was going to confront him or just catch my breath. But when I reached his door, I heard it again. His voice. Soft. Familiar. But not speaking to God. Not preparing for vows. Not in prayer. Just whispering. Let me just get through today. Once the honeymoon's over. You know you're the one I want. That same line from the text message. Same words. Same betrayal. And that's when I knew. I didn't open the door. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. I just stood there for a moment, gripping the small velvet box in my hand so tightly the corners dug into my palm. Inside were my father's cufflinks. The ones he wore on his wedding day. The ones I'd planned to pass on to Caleb. But now they felt like a lie. A promise meant for someone else. I turned. I walked out of the hallway. Out of the chapel. The wind had picked up slightly, tugging at my veil, which was still pinned to my hair. I walked past the guests gathering outside. Past the rows of white chairs. past the organist warming up the prelude. And I sat down on the stone bench under the dogwood tree. The same one Caleb and I had taken engagement photos under just 3 weeks before. I opened the cufflink box, looked at the silver, the initials, the legacy, and I let them fall into the grass. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because I wasn't heartbroken. Not yet. But I was beginning to feel something else. Not grief. Not rage. Clarity. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. And I knew then that the next move I made, it wouldn't be about revenge or romance. It would be about me. About what I deserved. About what I was no longer willing to overlook. I didn't drive home. I drove to Ruthie's. She lived on the edge of town in a yellow one-story house with a porch swing that always felt like a prayer answered. No one ever needed to knock there. Ruthie could read a person's spirit through the screen door. When she opened it and saw my face, the dress still clinging to me, the veil tangled in my curls, she didn't ask a single question. She just pulled me in and held me like she'd been preparing for that moment her whole life. That night I didn't say much. I sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at a box of untouched wedding cake while the perfume of lilac and sweat clung to me like disappointment. Ruthie brewed tea. Leona sat across from me, arms folded, anger radiating off her in waves. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't have to. Then, somewhere between the second sip of tea and the 5th time I checked my phone, I whispered, "This ain't the first time I felt it coming." And just like that, the memory returned, uninvited but vivid. My first marriage ended not with a goodbye, but with a crumpled receipt. It was tucked into the back pocket of his jeans. A hotel address. A timestamp. A name I didn't recognize. He denied it, of course. Said it was a mistake. Said it was work. But the lie had spoken to me long before he ever opened his mouth. My mama used to say, a woman can sense a lie before it's even spoken. And now, that same lie had found its way back to me. Different man. Different day. Same ache. By morning, Caleb had called me 16 times. No texts. No explanations. Just voicemails. Each one sounded more desperate than the last. In one, his voice cracked as he begged, "Grace, whatever you think you heard, it wasn't like that. Please don't do this to us. I love you. Please call me back." But I didn't. Because I knew what he'd say. And more importantly, I knew what I felt. Still, I couldn't rest until I knew everything. Leona saw it before I did. She always had that fire in her, that need to get to the bottom of things. "Do you want to know who sent the message?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. I just stared down at my tea, then nodded. "Yes," I said. "I need to." And that was all she needed to hear. She rolled up her sleeves, opened her laptop, and got to work like a woman on a mission. The number from the text had no name. Just 10 digits and a one-line warning. But Leona was patient. Thorough. She pulled app data. Cross-referenced social media handles. Ran it through a reverse lookup tool. Hours passed. And then a name appeared. Desiree Vaughn. 26 years old. Used to sing in the church choir, first soprano. Always wore red lipstick and never left service without hugging someone and offering to pray for them. I remembered her now. She stopped attending the church nearly 2 years ago. Back then, I never thought much of it. People come and go. But what I didn't know was that her absence began just as Caleb started quietly transferring savings into a separate account. Ruthie checked public records. Leona checked Venmo, Zelle, and payment histories. And like puzzle pieces falling into place, the picture sharpened. Monthly payments from Caleb to Desiree, every month for nearly 2 years. Rent. Car repairs. A tuition payment labeled nursing school. And most recently, a bill from a women's clinic. Unlabeled. But suggestive enough to raise every alarm I had tried to silence. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just asked Leona, "Is she pregnant?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was strategic. Deliberate. Carefully hidden beneath sermons and choir robes. I went through my phone and searched Caleb's messages, the ones I hadn't deleted. And then I found it. A message from months ago when he canceled dinner at the last minute. Said he had to meet with a young church member in crisis. The timestamp matched a payment to Desiree, that same evening. Another lie wearing a pastor's smile. And then the final crack came. I called Elder Johnson, one of the church elders who had prayed over our engagement. I wasn't angry. I just needed to know. I asked him gently, "Did you ever notice anything off about Caleb?" There was a long pause. Too long. Then came his reply. "Grace, this isn't the first time Caleb's had trouble with boundaries." My hand went cold around the phone. I thanked him and hung up. No more questions. No more illusions. This wasn't cold feet. This wasn't gossip. This was a pattern. And the people who could have stopped it chose to stay quiet. I looked at Leona. Her jaw was tight, her eyes fierce. And I said, he fooled them all. But not me. Not anymore. Later that evening, I stood in front of Ruthie's hallway mirror. My dress still hung beside it, creased but unbroken. I reached for the crimson ribbon Mama had left in her sewing box years ago. When a woman's heart is betrayed, she once told me, tie red at your center, to remind the world that even a broken heart still beats. So I did. I tied it around my waist, snug and certain. I didn't cancel the wedding. Not officially. The chapel still held the flowers. The guests still had the address. But I wasn't going back to be a bride. I was going back to be heard. The morning of what should have been my wedding felt strangely calm. No tears. No panic. No questions. Just clarity. Ruthie stood beside me, steaming my dress while humming a slow hymn her mother used to sing. Leona sat nearby, flipping through a stack of folded vow cards I hadn't yet touched. My phone buzzed again. Another missed call. Gil. I didn't answer. He had left 27 voicemails by now. I hadn't played a single one, because there was nothing he could say that would rewrite what I already knew. Some truths don't need a response. They just need to be faced. That morning I didn't eat. I didn't sip tea. I just stared at my reflection, letting the silence speak louder than any choir ever could. The dress still shimmered, ivory satin and lace hugging my shoulders delicately. But this time I added something extra. A crimson ribbon. It cinched tightly around my waist, bold and unapologetic. My mother's idea. Southern folklore passed down through quiet heartbreak. A woman betrayed ties red at her center, she used to say, so the world knows her heart may be cracked, but it still beats strong. I wasn't wearing it for fashion. I was wearing it for remembrance. The chapel was still booked. The program still printed. Guests still arriving, confused but hopeful after a last-minute message went out. She's coming after all. But I wasn't coming to say, I do. I was coming to say what needed to be said. Ruthie helped me set up the camera in the guest bedroom. A simple tripod. Natural light pouring through the window. No makeup. No veil. Just me. I took a breath, looked into the lens, and pressed record. Caleb, I began, this isn't how I wanted our story to end. But this is the ending you chose. My voice didn't shake. I didn't read from paper. I just spoke. You didn't just lie to me. You built a life with someone else while asking me to build one with you. I paused, gathering breath from somewhere deeper. And to the congregation, to the women who whispered in hallways and the men who laid hands on our union while knowing his past. I see you. I forgive none of you. For 7 minutes I told the truth. No yelling. No insults. Just facts. Desiree's name. The monthly payments. The clinic visit. The time-stamped lies. The silence from the elders who had known and said nothing. I ended it with the words Caleb never expected. I wore this dress to start a new chapter. I'm wearing it now to close one. My vows were real. I just needed to know if yours were too. Turns out they weren't. So I'm saying mine now, to myself. I paused, looking straight through the camera as if every woman who'd ever felt small was watching. I vow never again to love someone louder than they love me. I vow to trust the voice inside me more than the voices around me. And I vow that the next time I walk into a chapel, it won't be to prove I'm worthy. It'll be because I already know I am. I pressed stop. Leona sat frozen. Ruthie wiped a tear she didn't even realize had fallen. I didn't cry. Because this wasn't mourning. This was rebirth. I uploaded the video to a private link. And then I sent it to 3 people. Caleb, the church leadership team, and Elder Johnson. Then we drove. I carried my dress in one hand, the sealed vow cards in the other. As we approached the chapel, the scene was surreal. Guests had gathered again. Some seated. Some standing. All waiting for a bride they didn't expect to show her face. But I wasn't there for them. I walked inside alone. No escort. No veil. No piano prelude. Just the echo of my heels against the old stone floor, and the crimson ribbon like a scar stitched across satin. Halfway down the aisle I saw him. Gil. Standing at the altar. Shoulders tense. Hands folded. Relief flooding his face the moment he saw me. He smiled, nervously, expectantly. But I didn't smile back. I didn't even look at him. I scanned the room, the congregation, the choir loft, the rows of elders. The same people who had praised our love. Prayed over our future. I raised my hand and nodded toward the sound booth in the back. Then, silence. The pianist stopped mid-note. And in that stillness, my voice began to play. Not mine in real time, but the voice message I had overheard. Caleb's voice. Let me just get through today. Once the honeymoon's over, I'll take care of everything. You know you're the one I want. Gasps shattered the silence like breaking glass. Someone dropped their program. A woman clutched her chest. One of the elders stood as if to speak, but said nothing. Caleb's face went pale. He tried to step forward. But I raised my hand again. And he stopped. Then from the fourth pew, a woman stood. Red suit. Black heels. Desiree. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence said everything. I didn't move toward her. I didn't move toward Caleb. I walked slowly up to the pulpit. Took out the folded copy of my vows, not the ones I wrote for Caleb. The ones I wrote for me. And I read them. Aloud. Slowly. Steadily. To everyone. To the man I thought I'd marry. You took my trust. You took my peace. You took the love I offered with open hands. But today, I take something back. My voice never wavered. I take back my voice. I take back my worth. I take back the version of me that almost settled. Because she believed silence was strength. Then I turned to Caleb, who was frozen, lips parted but silent. Today I don't say, I do. I say goodbye. I placed the vows on the pulpit, handed my bouquet to the usher nearest to me, and walked back down the aisle. But this time, not in silence. In applause. I didn't walk out to whispers that day. I walked out to applause. Real, honest, rising applause, the kind that starts slow but grows until even those who don't know why they're clapping feel it in their bones. Women stood first. Then the choir. Then, like a ripple breaking through years of silence, even some of the elders rose to their feet, the same ones who once blessed a union built on lies. And as I stepped into the daylight, the air felt different. Lighter. Honest. I hadn't come to be married. I had come to be free. And I walked out of that chapel with my head held high, not because I needed validation but because I had finally stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. Some guests stood stunned. Others looked away, clutching their programs and pearls. But I didn't flinch. Not once. My heels hit the stone steps like punctuation marks. Every step forward was another truth spoken aloud. Caleb didn't follow. He couldn't. And even if he had, there was no longer anything he could say that would matter. By the end of that week, everything unraveled without me lifting another finger. Desiree confirmed the affair. Confirmed the money. Confirmed the whispered promises in parked cars and quiet corners of the church. The ones he never thought would surface. When a local reporter reached out to Caleb for a statement, he gave none. But sometimes silence speaks louder than confession. 3 elders quietly stepped down from the church board. The official statement read moral oversight. But for anyone paying attention, it was clear. They had chosen silence over truth. And now they were being held accountable for it. I never returned to that chapel. Not as a member. Not even as a guest. But I didn't retreat either. Because something inside me had shifted. Something strong. Something sacred. 3 months later, I launched a podcast. I called it Red Flags, Ribbon Ties. Just my voice. A microphone. And a vow to tell the truth, mine and others. Each episode started the same. Welcome, sister. If your heart is tired, you're in the right place. I didn't start it to be a voice for anyone. I just needed to speak. But what I didn't expect was how many would listen. Emails poured in. Messages from women in Georgia, Texas, Ohio, and even one from Nairobi. Some were short. Some came with audio. Some were anonymous. But all of them had one thing in common. They had all once ignored a whisper that tried to protect them. Then came the video. Someone, I still don't know who, had recorded the moment I stood at the altar and said, "Today I don't say, I do. I say goodbye." They clipped it, posted it, and within days, it went viral. 1 million views. Then 2. Then 10. A young spoken word artist in Atlanta even turned my vows into a poem. Titled it Naomi's Vows, though that wasn't my name, I didn't correct her. Because the story had outgrown me now. It had become something bigger. Something louder. Something women could carry with them like armor. I was invited to speak at a women's event 2 towns over. Not about Caleb. Not about the scandal. But about discernment. How to listen when the stillness speaks louder than the noise. That day I stood on a stage in front of 300 women. My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. I wore a white blouse and a red ribbon around my wrist, not at my waist this time. Because healing had already made its home there. I told them, peace isn't passive. Peace is power. And I stopped mistaking silence for safety. And I meant every word. The old version of me, the one who would have shrunk, apologized, second-guessed herself, she was gone. Not bitter. Not broken. Just evolved. That day at the altar didn't destroy me. It woke me up. I had spent too many years tying my worth to other people's love. Too many nights convincing myself that patience was virtue when it was really quiet self-abandonment. But now I was the woman I needed when I was 30, 35, 40. The one who doesn't wait for closure. She creates it. People often ask me, "Do you regret not going through with the wedding?" And I always smile and say, I didn't walk away from love. I walked toward myself. Because walking alone isn't loneliness. Sometimes walking alone is deliverance. And I'd rather walk alone in truth than stand hand in hand with someone who lies. I didn't get the wedding I planned. No first dance. No champagne toast. No husband waiting at the end of the aisle. But what I got instead was better. I got truth. And truth is what I had been starved of for years. After the video went viral, people began to treat me differently. Some with reverence. Some with pity. Some with hushed curiosity, like I had become some kind of story people whispered about over dinner. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't bending to fit anyone's version of grace. I was standing in mine. The podcast grew faster than I ever imagined. Women sent in their stories of betrayal, survival, and starting over. And I read every one. I responded to the ones I could. Not with advice, but with recognition. I see you. I believe you. You're not alone. That was my promise. I never changed my number. Never blocked Caleb. I didn't need to. Because when you finally know your worth, their words lose their power. His last message was a long one. He said he was sorry. That he never meant to hurt me. That he still believed we were meant to be. But I didn't listen to the whole thing. Because what mattered wasn't his remorse. It was my release. Leona and I started cooking again, just like we used to before the wedding planning took over everything. Sunday afternoons were filled with gospel music, old family recipes, and belly laughter that spilled out the windows. Sometimes we laughed so hard we forgot what day it was. Other days I'd pause mid-stir and whisper, "Thank you, Lord, for the storm I didn't marry." I began speaking at more women's events, not about pain but about discernment. About how intuition isn't fear, it's wisdom wrapped in a whisper. And when I stood on those stages, ribbon tied neatly around my wrist or pinned to my blouse, I wasn't performing. I was testifying. Peace, I'd say, isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of knowing you don't have to settle. And the women nodded. Some cried. All understood. The chapel that once held my almost wedding sent me a letter a few months later. They asked if I'd like to reserve a future date, when the time is right. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and smiled. Because I knew something now. I didn't need a ceremony to feel whole. Love found me differently this time. Not in the arms of a man, but in the pages of the journal I had abandoned. In the softness of early morning sun on my porch. In the way I could laugh with my daughter without waiting for the next apology from someone who never deserved us. And slowly, life began again. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, purposeful, beautiful in its simplicity. One morning, a woman named Loretta, someone I'd never met, messaged me on Instagram. All she wrote was, "I walked away from the wrong man today, wearing red around my waist." And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because healing had finally rippled beyond me. Because women weren't just watching my story, they were rewriting their own. They say weddings are about forever. But sometimes, forever starts the moment you walk away. I didn't leave that church with a husband. I left with something harder to earn. Clarity. And clarity, once it arrives, doesn't beg to be understood. It just is. I tell women now, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your second chances. And you certainly don't owe anyone your forever. Unless they've proven they can hold it without breaking it. Some stories aren't fairy tales. They're freedom songs. And the most powerful thing a woman can say isn't, "I do." It's, "I'm done." I didn't get a ring, but I got redemption. And I wear that more proudly than any diamond ever could.